Silence holds the desert tonight. Stars burn cold above ancient sands where once great cities stood. In the darkness between dusk and dawn, when the world hesitates between what was and what will be, there exists a threshold, a space where wisdom waits. Long before pyramids pierced the sky, before pharaohs claimed divine right, before humanity carved its first symbol into stone, there emerged a consciousness, not born of flesh but of necessity itself, a mind that would become the foundation upon which reality learned to remember itself. This is the story of Thoth, the god who taught the universe to think. He did not command with thunder. He did not demand worship through fear. Instead, he offered something far more dangerous and far more enduring: understanding. The tools to measure infinity, the language to capture thought, the ability to look at chaos and see pattern. What would you do if you discovered that every word you speak is being recorded somewhere, that every choice you make tips a scale you cannot see, that knowledge itself might be the most powerful force in existence? Tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what draws you to ancient wisdom. If this journey speaks to something in you, consider subscribing. Now close your eyes for just a moment. Feel the weight of time pressing down and step into a world where gods walked between thoughts and reality bent to the precision of a single written word. In the beginning, there was none. Not emptiness, but potential. An infinite ocean of possibility where nothing had yet chosen what to become. No light distinguished itself from darkness. No sound broke the silence. No form emerged from the formless deep. The ancient Egyptians understood creation differently than we do. They did not imagine a sudden explosion, a moment of violent genesis. Instead, they envisioned a slow awakening, the universe becoming conscious of itself, piece by piece, breath by breath. From this primordial awareness, the first gods took shape, not as beings with bodies, but as principles with presence. Ra emerged as light itself, learning to shine. Geb became earth, remembering how to be solid. Nut stretched across the heavens as sky, discovering its own expanse. But creation faced an immediate problem. Without memory, each moment stood alone. Without structure, order could not persist. Without language, truth remained formless and fleeting. Something was needed. Someone was needed. A presence that could observe without consuming, record without distorting, understand without controlling. And so Thoth came into being. He was not born in the way we understand birth. Some texts claim he emerged from the skull of Set during a battle, born of conflict itself. Others say he spoke himself into existence, the first word ever uttered forming his very essence. Still others whisper that Ra, the sun god, thought him into being during a moment of profound contemplation. Perhaps all these stories hold truth. Perhaps Thoth's origin remained deliberately mysterious because a god of wisdom understands that certainty can be the enemy of understanding. What is known is this: Thoth arrived bearing gifts the universe desperately needed. The concept of sequence, the notion of consequence, the radical idea that what happened yesterday should inform what happens tomorrow. Where other gods embodied force, Thoth embodied reflection. While they acted, he understood. While they created, he comprehended. While they ruled, he recorded. Picture him in those first moments of creation, not towering and terrible, but calm and observant. His form was often shown with the head of an ibis, that patient wading bird that stands motionless in shallow water, watching, waiting, noticing everything that others miss. The curved beak mirrored the crescent moon, the celestial body that would become his greatest symbol. Sometimes he appeared as a baboon, the creature that greeted each dawn with calls, as if acknowledging time's passage. Both forms spoke to the same truth. Thoth was the witness, the one who saw what others overlooked. In these early days, the cosmos was fragile. Creation had not yet solidified. Reality could still slip back into none's formless waters. The boundary between existence and non-existence remained thin, permeable, uncertain. Thoth understood that creation needed more than raw power to survive. It needed precision. It needed law. Not the rigid law of tyranny, but the flowing law of natural order, the kind of structure that allows a river to be both free and contained, wild yet predictable. The Egyptians called this principle Ma'at, usually translated as truth, justice, or order, but really meaning something deeper, cosmic rightness, the universe functioning as it should, balance maintained not through force, but through alignment. Ma'at was often personified as a goddess, depicted with an ostrich feather on her head. But Ma'at, as a principle, needed a guardian who could translate cosmic law into applicable wisdom, someone who could help the universe understand its own rules. That guardian was Thoth. He began by observing, watching how the Nile rose and fell in predictable cycles, noting how stars traced the same paths year after year, recognizing that beneath apparent chaos lay hidden order waiting to be discovered. Then he did something revolutionary. He started counting. Not merely tallying objects, but measuring time itself, dividing the endless flow of existence into manageable portions, days, months, seasons, years. Through this act, Thoth gave creation its first calendar, its first way of remembering where it had been and anticipating where it was going. But counting was not enough. Numbers alone could not capture the fullness of existence. Experience needed a way to be preserved, transmitted, understood across the gulf of time. And so Thoth invented writing. To the modern mind, writing seems utilitarian, a tool for communication, nothing more. But to the ancient Egyptians, writing was sacred technology, divine magic, the ability to capture thought and make it immortal. They called hieroglyphs Merdu Netcher, the words of the gods. Each symbol carried power, intention, reality compressed into form. To write was not simply to record, it was to participate in creation itself, to add to the universe's ongoing story. Thoth gave this gift to the world carefully. He understood that with writing came enormous responsibility. Words once written could not be unspoken. They persisted, they influenced, they shaped reality for generations yet unborn. In those first dawn hours of existence,
As the universe learned its own name, Thoth worked quietly. No grand pronouncements, no demands for recognition, just patient, precise, essential work. He taught the other gods how to codify their domains, how to establish laws that would endure, how to make agreements that time could not erode. He became the cosmic notary, the divine secretary, the one who ensured that reality remained consistent from moment to moment. Without him, each sunrise might be completely different from the last. Each flood might ignore the lessons of previous floods. Each generation of gods might forget what the previous generation had established. Thoth was the thread of continuity in a universe still learning how to be continuous. Yet he never sought dominion. Power over others did not interest him. Power over chaos did. The power to transform confusion into clarity. The power to find pattern in randomness. The power to show that beneath the surface of things, meaning waited to be discovered. As creation stabilized and the first age of gods unfolded, Thoth positioned himself not at the center of power, but beside it, advisor rather than ruler, counselor rather than king, the voice that spoke last, not because it commanded authority, but because it offered truth. And truth, the Egyptians understood, was the most powerful force in existence.
As divine society took shape and gods claimed their various domains, the need for Thoth's gifts became increasingly apparent. Power alone could not sustain order. Even immortal beings needed structure, memory, accountability. Thoth became the scribe of the gods, but this was no mere secretarial role. He was the architect of divine governance, the one who translated will into law and chaos into system. Consider what it meant to record the actions of gods. These were beings of immense power, capable of reshaping reality with a thought. Their disputes could unmake creation. Their agreements held the universe together. Every word they spoke mattered cosmically. Thoth attended every divine council. He stood present at every major decision, not to vote, not to command, but to observe and document. His stylus moved across tablets, capturing not just what was said, but what was meant, not just agreements, but their implications. He understood something crucial. Memory is selective. Even gods could forget, distort, or rationalize, but written words stood as witnesses to truth. Once Thoth recorded something, it became fixed, real, undeniable. This gave him unusual power, not the power to control, but the power to remind. When disputes arose, Thoth would produce the records. His documentation became the foundation of divine law, more binding than any individual god's strength. Imagine a being who cannot be swayed by emotion, who holds no grudges, who favors no faction, a presence that speaks only after everyone else has finished, and when it speaks with the weight of objective truth. That was Thoth in the assemblies of heaven.
His role extended beyond simple record-keeping. He became the interpreter of divine will, the translator of cosmic intention into practical application. When Ra decreed something, Thoth ensured the decree made sense. When natural law needed adjustment, Thoth calculated the consequences. He was the bridge between intention and reality, between what the gods wanted and what the universe could support.
But Thoth's most crucial contribution was his mastery of language itself. Words were not neutral tools to him, they were forces of creation. To name something was to give it existence. To define something was to limit and empower it simultaneously. The Egyptians believed that Thoth had literally invented language, not just Egyptian, but the principle of linguistic communication itself. The idea that meaning could be encoded in sound and symbol, that thought could leap from one mind to another across space and time. With language came magic. The Egyptians called it Heka, the fundamental force that gods used to shape reality. And Heka worked through words. Spoken correctly, with proper intention and cosmic alignment, words could heal, protect, transform, or destroy. Thoth became the master of Heka because he understood words at their deepest level. He knew not just what to say, but when to say it, how to say it, and most importantly, when to remain silent. Silence, Thoth taught, was as much a part of language as speech. The space between words gave them meaning. The pause before speaking allowed wisdom to form. The choice not to speak sometimes carried more power than any utterance. In the heavenly realm, Thoth compiled vast libraries of knowledge. Not physical places, but conceptual repositories. Everything that was known or could be known, organized, categorized, preserved. Medical knowledge, astronomical observations, mathematical principles, magical formulas, all under his careful stewardship. These were not hoarded secrets. Thoth did not believe in knowledge for its own sake, but he understood that wisdom must be dispensed carefully. The right information given at the wrong time caused harm. The wrong information, no matter when given, caused chaos. So he became the guardian of appropriate revelation, the one who decided what could be shared and what must be protected. Not from arrogance, but from responsibility. He had seen what happened when powerful knowledge fell into unprepared hands. As divine drama unfolded, Thoth remained the stable center. When Set murdered Osiris and scattered his body across Egypt, Thoth helped Isis recover the pieces. He provided the knowledge necessary for resurrection, the first time death was overcome. When Horus and Set battled for the throne of Egypt, raging across decades in a conflict that threatened to tear creation apart, it was Thoth who mediated. Both claimants were powerful, both had legitimate arguments. Force alone could not resolve the dispute without destroying what they fought over. Thoth listened to both sides. He weighed claims, he examined evidence, he consulted precedent. And finally, he rendered judgment based not on personal preference, but on Ma'at, on what was cosmically right. His decision stood because it was rooted in truth, not power. Even Set, furious at losing, could not overturn it.
Even Horus, victorious, had to accept the conditions Thoth imposed. The judgment became law because Thoth had spoken it. This was his unique authority. He did not rule through force, he ruled through clarity. And in a universe where chaos constantly threatened to overwhelm order, clarity was the ultimate power. But Thoth's work extended beyond divine politics. He turned his attention increasingly towards the newest addition to creation, humanity.
Humans were fragile creatures. Their lives were brief flickers compared to divine eternity. Their memories failed. Their understanding was limited. Yet they possessed something remarkable, the capacity to learn. Thoth saw in humanity a project worthy of his attention. If he could give them tools, knowledge, structure, they might become more than merely mortal. They might touch something eternal. So he began to teach. Not directly, not usually. Gods did not typically walk among humans in those days. But through inspiration, through signs, through the slow accumulation of discovered truth, Thoth guided humanity's development. He taught them to observe the heavens and track the stars. From this came the calendar, allowing farmers to predict the Nile's flooding and plant accordingly. Starvation decreased, civilization became possible. He taught them to measure land and divide it fairly. From this came geometry, mathematics, architecture. Cities rose, temples aligned with celestial precision. The desert bloomed with human achievement. He taught them to record their thoughts and preserve their stories. From this came literature, law, history. Memory extended beyond individual lifetimes. Culture became cumulative. But most importantly, he taught them to seek truth, to question, to observe, to test their assumptions against reality, to value understanding over certainty. This was perhaps his greatest gift and his most dangerous one, because a mind trained to seek truth will not stop seeking. It will question everything, including the gods themselves. Thoth knew this. He understood that in teaching humans to think, he was creating beings who might eventually challenge divine authority. But he believed the risk was worth taking. An ignorant world was a stagnant world. Only through knowledge could creation continue to evolve. As centuries passed and human civilization flourished along the Nile, Thoth's influence deepened. Every scribe who bent over papyrus considered himself under Thoth's patronage. Every physician who mixed herbs and spoke healing words invoked his name. Every judge who weighed evidence followed his example.
Egypt became a civilization built on his principles: careful observation, accurate record-keeping, balanced judgment, and the eternal pursuit of Ma'at. The priests of Thoth formed their own orders, centers of learning where knowledge was preserved and transmitted. These houses of life, as they were called, became the ancient world's first universities, places where medicine, astronomy, mathematics, and magic were studied with equal seriousness. Because to Thoth they were all aspects of the same thing, understanding reality's underlying structure. The physician healing a wound, the astronomer tracking a planet, the mathematician calculating a proportion, and the magician speaking a spell were all engaged in the same fundamental act, reading the universe's hidden grammar. But as Thoth's influence spread
and human knowledge deepened, a question began to emerge, one that would haunt philosophy for millennia to come. Was there such a thing as too much knowledge? Were there some truths too dangerous to know, some secrets that should remain forever sealed? Thoth pondered this as he watched humanity grow ever more capable. He had given them fire in the form of wisdom, and like all fire, it could warm or destroy depending on how it was used. His answer was characteristically nuanced. Knowledge itself was neutral, but the readiness to receive it was not. The same truth could enlighten a prepared mind or shatter an unprepared one. And so he continued his work, but with increasing care, guarding not against knowledge itself, but against its premature revelation, waiting for the moment when understanding would serve balance rather than upset it. The eternal scribe wrote on, patient and precise, knowing that his words would echo far beyond even his ability to foresee.
Time, for most beings, simply happens. It flows forward, indifferent and inevitable. But Thoth saw something different. He saw that time was not merely a river carrying existence along. It was a structure, a framework, something that could be understood, measured, and even negotiated. The moon became his primary tool for this understanding. While Ra blazed across the sky in predictable solar glory, the moon followed a more subtle pattern, waxing and waning, appearing and disappearing, cycling through phases that marked time in ways the sun could not. Thoth made the moon his domain, not through conquest, but through comprehension. He studied its movements with obsessive precision, every phase, every position, every relationship to the stars around it. From this patient observation came profound insights. The lunar cycle gave humanity its first reliable calendar beyond the obvious progression of days. Months emerged from moonlight. The year divided itself into manageable portions. Agriculture aligned with celestial rhythm. Ritual found its proper timing. But Thoth's relationship with time went deeper than mere measurement. He understood that different moments carried different qualities, that the universe itself breathed in cycles of activity and rest, growth and decay, expansion and consolidation. There were times when action was favored, times when contemplation was required, times when speaking truth would be heard, times when silence served better. Thoth taught that wisdom meant knowing not just what to do, but when to do it. This was a revolutionary thinking. It suggested that success and failure were not just matters of effort or skill, but of timing, that the same action at different moments produced different results, that reality itself pulsed with windows of opportunity and periods of resistance. One story captures this understanding perfectly. The sky goddess Nut had been cursed by Ra, forbidden from giving birth on any day of any month of the year, a seemingly impossible restriction. How could she bear children if every day was forbidden? Thoth saw the loophole. He challenged Khonsu, another lunar deity, to a game. Through superior strategy and deep understanding of chance, Thoth won portions of moonlight from each day. With these accumulated fragments, he created 5 extra days, days that existed outside the official calendar, days that were, technically, part of no month. On these 5 days, Nut gave birth to Osiris, Isis, Set, Nephthys, and Horus the Elder, the most important gods of Egypt's mythology, born because Thoth understood that reality had flexibility, that rigid law could be navigated through wisdom, that impossible problems sometimes had elegant solutions. This story revealed something crucial about Thoth's nature. He was not a rebel breaking rules. He was a scholar finding solutions within them. He bent reality not through force, but through understanding its grammar so completely that he could write in its language. Time itself became Thoth's canvas. He painted upon it with precision, creating structures that would endure millennia. The division of day into hours, the division of hours into smaller units, the coordination of solar and lunar cycles, the grand cosmic clockwork that allowed civilization to function. Egyptian priests tracked time with religious devotion because they understood it as sacred. Every hour had its deity, its quality, its appropriate activities. The night was divided into 12 portions, each representing a stage in Ra's journey through the underworld. Thoth oversaw this entire elaborate system, ensuring nothing fell out of synchronization. But numbers were not merely practical tools to Thoth, they were philosophical truths. Mathematical relationships revealed cosmic principles. Geometry demonstrated how space organized itself. Ratios and proportions showed how different forces balanced. The Egyptians developed sophisticated mathematics under Thoth's influence. They could calculate the volume of pyramids, the area of curved surfaces, the ratios necessary for architectural harmony. They understood fractions, algebraic thinking, and geometric progression. Yet they viewed these mathematical insights as revelations, not inventions. Numbers existed eternally. Mathematics was discovered, not created. And Thoth was the divine mathematician who understood reality's numerical foundation. Sacred architecture embodied this understanding. Temples were built according to precise proportions that reflected cosmic order. The alignment with cardinal directions, the relationships between different sections, the measurements of columns and chambers, all followed mathematical principles believed to have come from Thoth. When a temple was constructed correctly, it became more than a building. It became a physical manifestation of Mahat, a place where divine order touched earthly reality, where the cosmos recognized itself in stone and space. Thoth's role in timekeeping extended to the most consequential measurement of all, the duration of human life. While humans could not know exactly when death would come, they could prepare for it. And that preparation required understanding time's passage and death's inevitability. This awareness shaped Egyptian culture profoundly. Life was lived with an eye toward eternity. Actions were taken with the understanding that their consequences would extend beyond the visible world. Time was not merely quantitative, but qualitative. What mattered was not how long you lived, but how you lived during the time you had. Thoth encouraged this perspective. Through his teachings, Egyptians came to view their earthly existence as a preparation for judgment. Every choice was being recorded somewhere. Every action tipped cosmic scales.
Time was the medium through which character revealed itself. As humanity's understanding of time deepened, so did their anxiety about it. Time brought change, decay, death. The eternal gods might measure centuries with ease, but for mortals, time was a thief stealing away everything precious. Thoth addressed this fear not by denying death, but by giving it structure. He taught that time continued beyond physical death, that consciousness persisted, that the journey merely changed form.
This teaching transformed death from an ending into a transition. The afterlife was not escape from time, but entrance into a different kind of time, eternal time. Time aligned perfectly with Ma'at, where moments no longer brought loss. To reach this eternal time, one had to pass through judgment, and at that judgment, Thoth would be present with his tablets and his perfect memory, recording the truth of every life lived. This was time's ultimate function, Thoth taught, not to punish or reward, but to reveal, to show what had always been true, but might not have been acknowledged. Time was reality's way of testing itself, of learning what endured and what dissolved under the pressure of passing moments. In quiet hours of night, when the moon hung high and silver light painted the desert, Egyptians felt Thoth's presence most strongly. Time itself seemed to pause. The endless rushing forward stopped for just a moment, and in that stillness, understanding became possible. This was Thoth's gift with time, not the ability to control it, but to exist fully within it, to be present rather than constantly racing toward the future or clinging to the past, to recognize that each moment, properly observed, contained eternity. As ages passed and dynasties rose and fell, time proved both destroyer and preserver. Temples crumbled, but knowledge survived. Bodies died, but wisdom lived. Kings were forgotten, but principles endured. Thoth continued his patient work, measuring, recording, understanding. Time moved forward, but he moved with it, neither rushing ahead nor falling behind. Always present, always observing, always writing the story that reality told through its own unfolding. And within that story, a question crystallized that would define his most important role. What happens when time ends for an individual, when the clock stops and the final accounting comes? The answer would be found in a hall where hearts were weighed against feathers, where truth confronted itself, where Thoth's greatest responsibility revealed itself as judge of the dead. Death in ancient Egypt was not a wall but a doorway. The body might fail, but consciousness continued. The heart might stop, but identity persisted. Yet this continuation was not automatic. It required passage through judgment, and at the center of that judgment stood Thoth. The Hall of Two Truths awaited every soul. Called also the Hall of Ma'at, it was a place outside ordinary space, neither fully in the world of the living nor entirely in the realm of the dead. A threshold where truth confronted itself and every life revealed its weight. Imagine the soul's journey there. You have died, your body has been carefully preserved, the proper rituals have been performed.
Now your consciousness, freed from flesh, travels through darkness toward a vast chamber filled with divine presence. You enter the hall. Its dimensions are impossible. Pillars rise like principles made solid. The air carries the weight of absolute attention. Nothing can be hidden here. Nothing can be falsified. Reality itself has become witness. At the chamber's center stands the scale, ancient, perfect, incorruptible. On one side will be placed your heart, the organ the Egyptians believed contained not thoughts, but truth. Your heart knows every action you took, every choice you made, every moment you aligned with Ma'at or departed from it. On the other side rests the feather of Ma'at, a single ostrich feather, impossibly light. It represents truth in its purest form, balance in its perfect expression, the standard against which all existence is measured. Anubis, the jackal-headed god of embalming, adjusts the scales with infinite care. Osiris, lord of the afterlife, sits in judgment, his green skin representing resurrection and renewal. 42 divine assessors line the hall, each representing a principle of cosmic law. And there, beside the scale, stands Thoth. He holds his palette and stylus. His ibis head tilts slightly as he observes, missing nothing. He is not there to plead your case or condemn you. He is there to record truth. The weighing begins.
Your heart is placed upon the scale. Anubis ensures fairness. The balance shifts, seeking equilibrium. And as it does, you must speak the negative confession, a declaration of innocence that echoes through the hall. I have not killed. I have not stolen. I have not lied in the place of truth. I have not caused pain without just cause. 42 declarations, 42 principles, each aimed at one of the assessors, each tested against the weight of your actual life. But these are not questions asking if you were perfect. They ask if you strived for Ma'at, if you recognized cosmic order and attempted to align yourself with it, if you lived with awareness of balance rather than in pure self-interest. The scale reveals truth. Words cannot deceive it. Belief cannot sway it. Only the actual weight of a life lived determines the outcome. If your heart balances with the feather, lightness meeting lightness, the 42 assessors declare you justified. Osiris welcomes you to the field of reeds, an eternal realm resembling earthly Egypt at its most perfect. There you will know peace, continuity, and harmony forever. But if your heart is heavy, if cruelty and deception have given it weight, if you lived against Ma'at rather than with it, then Amit waits, the devourer, part crocodile, part lion, part hippopotamus. She does not torture, she simply ends. The heavy heart is consumed, the soul ceases, existence stops. This was the Egyptians' true terror, not punishment, but oblivion, to be forgotten, to cease meaning anything. And through it all, Thoth records. His stylus moves across his tablet, inscribing the judgment with perfect accuracy. This record becomes part of cosmic memory. It cannot be changed, cannot be appealed, cannot be erased. What is written is what is. But Thoth's role here was more than mere record-keeping. He was also advocate and guide. Throughout the journey to the hole, Thoth had been present in the funerary texts painted on tomb walls, the spells written on papyrus scrolls placed with the dead, the prayers spoken during burial. These texts, compiled into what we now call the Book of the Dead, were attributed to Thoth's wisdom. They were not meant to trick the judgment or falsify the weighing. They were meant to help the soul remember itself.
In death, confusion could overcome consciousness. The soul might forget its name. Without your name, you ceased to exist. Thoth's spells helped the dead remember who they were, what they had done, why they mattered. He provided knowledge of the afterlife's geography, how to pass the gates, what to say to the guardians, how to navigate a realm where normal rules did not apply. This knowledge was not meant to circumvent judgment. It was meant to arrive at judgment capable of speaking truth. Some spells offered protection against dangers in the afterlife. Others provided clarity when confusion threatened. Still others helped the soul maintain its form, its identity, its essential self as it traveled beyond physical reality. Thoth understood something profound about death. It was a test of integrity. Could you remain yourself when everything familiar was stripped away? Could you face absolute truth about your own life? Could you accept the weight of your choices? His texts prepared people for this test while they still lived. They taught that the judgment was not something to fear if you had lived justly, that death was gentle to those who had practiced Ma'at, that the Hall of Two Truths was not a trap but a revelation. This belief shaped Egyptian ethics powerfully. Knowing that Thoth would record every detail of your life encouraged people to live with awareness, to speak carefully, to act justly, to consider consequences. It also democratized the afterlife. Early in Egyptian history, only pharaohs were believed capable of eternal life. But as Thoth's teachings spread, the possibility extended to everyone, rich or poor, powerful or humble. Anyone who lived according to Ma'at could pass through judgment. This was revolutionary. It suggested that cosmic value came not from earthly status, but from alignment with truth. That a poor farmer who lived justly weighed lighter than a wealthy noble who lived cruelly. That what mattered to the universe was not what you had, but how you were. In this way, Thoth's judgment hall became a place of ultimate equality. The only aristocracy was integrity. The only currency was truth. Yet Thoth's mercy appeared in subtle ways. Some texts suggest he occasionally interceded for souls who struggled with the confession, not to falsify their heart's weight, but to ensure they understood the principles they were being judged against, that confusion did not damn them when genuine misunderstanding had led to error. He was, after all, the God of wisdom, and wisdom understood that ignorance and malice were not the same, that mistakes born of limitation differed from choices rooted in cruelty. Justice without nuance was not Ma'at, it was rigidity. As the concept of judgment evolved through Egyptian history, Thoth's presence remained constant. Kings prepared elaborate tombs filled with texts to guide them. Common people inscribed spells on modest scrolls. Everyone, in their way, sought Thoth's knowledge to help them navigate death. The Hall of Two Truths thus became more than a place of judgment. It became a mirror. While you lived, it reminded you constantly that actions mattered, that truth endured, that you were writing your own judgment with every choice.
And when death finally came, when you stood before the scales and faced the feather's perfect lightness, Thoth was there not as enemy, but as faithful recorder, the one who ensured that your life's story was told accurately, that your weight was measured fairly, that truth and truth alone determined your fate. In quiet moments, Egyptians wondered what Thoth thought as he recorded these judgments. Did he feel satisfaction when hearts balanced, sorrow when they did not? Or was he beyond such emotions, pure observation uncolored by preference? Perhaps the answer is that Thoth felt what truth itself feels, nothing and everything, neutral toward outcomes, but absolutely committed to accuracy. The scales did not celebrate or mourn, they simply were. And Thoth, like the scales, simply recorded what was. As eternity stretched forward and countless souls passed through judgment, Thoth's tablets filled with the story of humanity. Every life, every choice, every consequence. A cosmic archive of moral weight, preserved perfectly, available to any who had wisdom to read it. This archive would become Thoth's greatest legacy, proof that existence mattered, that choices carried weight, that even in a vast universe, individual lives registered on scales of cosmic significance. The Hall of Two Truths still stands somewhere beyond ordinary perception. The scales still wait, the feather still rests lightly, impossibly light, and Thoth still records, patient and precise, ensuring that when truth confronts itself, clarity prevails. For in the end, his role was not to punish or reward, it was to illuminate, to make visible what had always been true but might not have been acknowledged, to show each soul exactly what it had become through the accumulated weight of choices made moment by moment across a lifetime. And in that illumination, justice was done, not through vengeance, but through revelation, not through divine whim, but through cosmic law. Ma'at prevailed because Thoth ensured it could not be denied, distorted, or forgotten.
To the ancient Egyptians, illness was never simple. A wound was not merely torn flesh. Fever was not just elevated temperature. Disease represented something deeper, disharmony between body, spirit, and cosmos. And healing required more than physical remedy. It required restoration of balance. Thoth understood this completely. As the god of wisdom, he saw that health and knowledge were inseparable. To heal was to understand. To cure was to realign. Medicine and magic were not opposing forces, but complementary approaches to the same fundamental problem: how to restore what had fallen into imbalance. The Egyptians developed sophisticated medical knowledge, remarkably advanced for their era. They performed surgeries, set broken bones, treated infections, and managed chronic conditions. But they never separated this practical knowledge from sacred understanding. Every physician was also a priest. Every treatment combined technique with ritual. This holistic approach came from Thoth's teachings. He had shown that reality operated on multiple levels simultaneously. The physical body existed within a spiritual framework. Mental state affected physical health. Emotional imbalance manifested as bodily disease. To treat only one level was to invite relapse. Medical papyri attributed to Thoth's wisdom contained detailed anatomical knowledge, surgical procedures, and pharmaceutical formulas. They describe symptoms with clinical precision and prescribe remedies based on careful observation.
But interwoven with this practical information are incantations, prayers, and magical spells. Modern minds might see this as primitive superstition contaminating genuine knowledge, but the Egyptians understood something we are only rediscovering, that belief affects biology, that words carry healing power, that meaning itself can be medicine. When a physician spoke a healing spell over a patient, several things happened simultaneously. The words focused the physician's intention, sharpening attention to detail. They calmed the patient's fear, allowing the body's natural healing processes to function better. And they aligned the treatment with cosmic order, invoking Ma'at to support recovery. Thoth taught that healing spells were not commands forcing the body to change. They were reminders, gentle suggestions helping the body remember its natural state of balance. The spell said, in essence, "This is what wholeness looks like. Return to this." This approach made Egyptian medicine remarkably effective, not because spells magically cured disease, but because the combination of practical treatment, emotional support, and meaningful ritual created optimal conditions for healing.
Thoth's medical knowledge extended to prevention as well. He taught that health required ongoing maintenance, proper diet, regular purification, balanced activity, and ethical living all contributed to wellness. Disease often arose from persistent imbalance that could have been corrected earlier through awareness. Mental and emotional suffering received equal attention. Grief could manifest as physical pain, anger could disturb digestion, fear could weaken immunity. Thoth's healing wisdom addressed the whole person, recognizing that you could not separate someone's body from their life circumstances, emotional state, or spiritual condition. Dream interpretation formed part of this healing practice. During sleep, the conscious mind released its grip and deeper truths could surface. Dreams were messages, though not always literal ones. Thoth guided physicians in reading these symbolic communications, understanding what the unconscious mind was trying to reveal about imbalance. Some dreams warned of illness before symptoms appeared. Others showed emotional conflicts requiring attention. Still others offered solutions to problems the waking mind could not solve. Thoth taught that dreams were dialogues between different aspects of self, and healing often required listening to these internal conversations. But Thoth's healing extended beyond individual bodies. He healed relationships, communities, and cosmic order itself. When conflicts arose that threatened social harmony, his wisdom provided resolution. When natural disasters disrupted the balance between humanity and environment, his knowledge helped restore equilibrium. His greatest healing work, however, involved death itself. For what is death but the ultimate wound, the final separation, the irreversible loss? Yet Thoth taught that even death could be healed, not by preventing it, which was impossible, but by transforming it into transition. The funerary texts he inspired were healing spells of the highest order, meant to cure the soul of mortality's trauma. These spells helped the dead remember themselves when identity threatened to dissolve. They provided protection against confusion and despair during the afterlife journey. They offered knowledge that transformed terror into understanding, making death not an ending, but a passage. In this way, Thoth healed the great wound of human existence,
our awareness of mortality. He could not grant immortality to flesh, but he could extend consciousness beyond flesh. He could ensure that meaning, identity, and awareness persisted even as the body returned to dust.
This healing of death's wound shaped Egyptian culture profoundly. Life was lived with less terror because death had been given structure, purpose, and hope. The certainty of judgment encouraged ethical living, but the possibility of eternal peace offered consolation. Thoth also addressed healing at the cosmic level. When divine conflicts threatened creation, his mediation restored harmony. When chaos surged against order, his spells reinforced Ma'at's boundaries. He was physician to reality itself, constantly working to maintain the health of existence. Magic, or Heka, was the primary tool for this cosmic healing. But magic in Egyptian understanding was not supernatural. It was natural law operating at a deeper level than ordinary perception could access. Magic was applied knowledge of how reality actually worked beneath surface appearances. Thoth mastered Heka because he understood its principles completely. He knew that energy followed attention, that symbols shaped consciousness, that properly aligned intention could influence probable outcomes, that words spoken with clarity and conviction carried force beyond their literal meaning. This was not mysticism divorced from reality. It was profound realism about reality's structure. The universe, Thoth taught, was more responsive than most beings realized. It could be worked with, cooperated with, aligned with, not controlled, but influenced through understanding. His magical texts provided formulas for protection, transformation, knowledge acquisition, and communication with divine forces. But these formulas only worked when approached correctly, with proper preparation, ethical grounding, and genuine understanding. Attempting magic without wisdom was dangerous. Like surgery performed by untrained hands, it could harm rather than heal. Thoth therefore guarded his deepest magical knowledge, revealing it only to those who had demonstrated readiness through study, discipline, and character. Some texts speak of Thoth's most secret teachings, knowledge so powerful that even gods approached it carefully. These were not spells for personal gain or power over others. They were understandings of reality's deepest structure, knowledge of how creation maintained itself, awareness of the principles underlying existence. To know these things was to carry enormous responsibility, because with such knowledge came the ability to disrupt cosmic balance, not through evil intent necessarily, but through careless application. Reality could be wounded by misused wisdom, just as surely as a body could be harmed by misdirected surgery. Thoth walked a careful line, therefore, between sharing knowledge and protecting creation from premature revelation. He wanted wisdom to spread, but he needed it to spread responsibly. This tension defined much of his later mythology. As Egyptian civilization flourished and medical knowledge expanded, Thoth's reputation as divine physician grew. Healers invoked him before treating patients. Medical schools formed under his patronage. Libraries of healing knowledge accumulated in temples dedicated to his wisdom. Yet he never promised miracles. Recovery took time. Some illnesses could not be cured. Death remained inevitable.
Thoth's healing offered not escape from reality, but alignment with it. He taught people to accept what could not be changed while working skillfully with what could. In quiet temple spaces where the sick came seeking relief, Thoth's presence was invoked through ritual and knowledge. Physicians worked with careful attention, treating each patient as a unique manifestation of cosmic principles. Healing became an art form, a science, and a spiritual practice simultaneously. And when healing failed, when death came despite best efforts, Thoth's wisdom provided consolation, for he had healed death itself by transforming it from ending into beginning. The ultimate physician had cured the ultimate wound, not by preventing death, but by ensuring it led somewhere rather than nowhere. This understanding would prove essential as Egyptian civilization itself faced decline, as temples fell and knowledge scattered, because Thoth had prepared his wisdom to survive even the death of the culture that first honored him.
Civilizations, like individual lives, follow cycles. They rise with vigor, mature into sophistication, then gradually decline as vitality fades and memory fails. Egypt, which had endured for millennia, eventually found itself surrounded by younger, hungrier powers. When Alexander the Great conquered Egypt in 332 BCE, he encountered a civilization ancient beyond his comprehension. Greece was young, energetic, confident. Egypt was old, deep, mysterious. The meeting of these cultures created something unexpected, transformation rather than destruction. Greek scholars who followed Alexander's armies discovered Egyptian wisdom with fascination. Here was knowledge older than anything in their own tradition, mathematics beyond what Greek teachers had imagined, astronomical observations spanning centuries, medical understanding of remarkable sophistication, and underlying it all, a philosophical framework that resonated strangely with emerging Greek thought. They learned of Thoth, the divine intellect who had structured reality through wisdom, and they recognized him immediately, for Greece had its own god of knowledge, boundaries, and communication, Hermes. Hermes was the messenger god, moving fluidly between divine and mortal realms, between conscious and unconscious, between life and death. He guided souls to the afterlife. He protected travelers crossing dangerous thresholds. He governed language, commerce, and cunning wisdom. The parallels were too striking to ignore. Both gods mediated between worlds. Both valued knowledge and communication. Both were associated with writing, magic, and the mysteries of existence. Both carried authority that came not from brute force, but from understanding.
The Greeks did not dismiss Thoth as a foreign deity. They saw him as their own Hermes, wearing Egyptian form. Or perhaps Hermes was Thoth translated into Greek understanding. The distinction hardly mattered. What mattered was the recognition that both cultures had sensed the same divine principle, that wisdom, not power, ultimately structured reality. From this recognition emerged a new figure, Hermes Trismegistus. Hermes, the thrice great, a fusion of identities that claimed descent from the deepest antiquity. Not quite God, not quite human, but the primordial teacher who had walked at the dawn of time and established the foundations of civilization.
texts attributed to Hermes Trismegistus began circulating in Alexandria, that great melting pot of cultures where Egyptian, Greek, Jewish, and later Roman traditions mixed and cross-pollinated. These texts claimed to preserve ancient Egyptian wisdom, translated and interpreted for new audiences. Whether they were genuine Egyptian teachings or Greek philosophical ideas dressed in Egyptian authority remains debated. Most likely, they were both, authentic principles passed down from Thoth's tradition, filtered through Greek philosophical frameworks and expressed in language that bridged cultures. The core teachings of this Hermetic wisdom echoed Thoth's original insights. The universe was ordered, intelligible, and responsive to understanding. Knowledge of cosmic principles allowed one to align with reality rather than struggle against it. Truth existed independently of belief and revealed itself to patient, disciplined observation. One key principle became especially famous: as above, so below. This suggested that patterns repeated at every scale of existence. What was true in the heavens was true on Earth. What operated in the microcosm operated in the microcosm. By understanding any level of reality deeply enough, one could understand all levels. This was pure Thoth, the idea that reality was fundamentally coherent, that wisdom gained in one domain applied to others, that the universe spoke a consistent language even when it used different dialects. Another principle taught that mind and matter were not opposites but aspects of the same underlying reality, that consciousness shaped experience, that thoughts had causal power, that changing inner understanding changed outer circumstances.
Again, this reflected Thoth's teaching that magic worked through alignment of intention with cosmic order, that words carried creative power, that knowledge, properly applied, transformed reality. Hermetic texts also emphasized transformation. The famous practice of alchemy, often misunderstood as simply trying to turn lead into gold, was really about internal refinement. Using physical processes as metaphors for spiritual development, purifying consciousness the way one purified metals, transmuting base qualities into noble ones through understanding and effort. This too came from Thoth's tradition. He had always taught that wisdom changed the one who possessed it, that knowledge was not merely information, but transformation, that understanding reality meant becoming more real yourself. As Hermetic ideas spread through the Hellenistic world, they carried Thoth's essence even when his name was rarely spoken. Philosophers, mystics, and scholars absorbed these teachings, often without knowing their Egyptian origin. The wisdom had crossed cultural boundaries successfully, surviving through transformation. Rome conquered Egypt politically, but Egypt conquered Rome intellectually. Roman thinkers engaged deeply with Hermetic texts, finding in them a sophisticated philosophical system that addressed questions Greek and Roman philosophy had struggled with. How did mind relate to matter? What was the nature of divine intelligence? How could humans access higher understanding? Early Christian theologians encountered Hermetic wisdom and saw in it echoes of their own teachings. Some praised Hermes Trismegistus as a pagan prophet who had glimpsed divine truth before Christ. Others viewed the texts more cautiously,
recognizing their power to inspire independent spiritual seeking outside church authority. The teachings survived, valued by diverse traditions even as they were interpreted differently. Jewish mysticism, Islamic philosophy, Christian theology, all engaged with Hermetic ideas, finding in them principles that transcended any single cultural framework. This was Thoth's ultimate victory. His wisdom had become universal, not by conquering cultures, but by offering truths that every culture could recognize: balance, knowledge, ethical responsibility, alignment with cosmic order. These principles spoke to something fundamental in human understanding. During the Middle Ages, when much ancient learning was lost or suppressed, Hermetic texts survived in monasteries, madrasas, and private collections. Scholars copied them carefully, preserving knowledge they sensed was precious even when they could not fully understand it. Alchemists particularly valued these teachings, using them as frameworks for both chemical experimentation and spiritual development. The laboratory became a temple. Physical transformation became metaphor for spiritual integration. Base metals represented unrefined consciousness. Gold represented purified awareness.
This was exactly how Thoth had always taught, practical and symbolic knowledge reinforcing each other, the outer work reflecting the inner work, material and spiritual transformation proceeding together. When the Renaissance arrived and European scholars rediscovered ancient texts, Hermes Trismegistus was revered as one of the founding fathers of wisdom. His supposed writings were studied alongside Plato and Aristotle. His principles influenced the emerging scientific revolution even as they inspired mystical movements. Figures like Isaac Newton studied Hermetic texts seriously, finding in them ideas about natural law, mathematical order, and universal principles that informed their scientific work. The line between science and magic had not yet hardened. Both were understood as methods for understanding reality's deeper structure. In this way, Thoth lived on, changed certainly, translated across languages and centuries, interpreted through different cultural lenses, but essentially unchanged in his core teaching that wisdom, not power, was humanity's greatest tool, that understanding reality meant living in harmony with it, that knowledge carried ethical responsibility. He had crossed the greatest boundary of all, from one civilization to another, from one age to another, surviving through transformation. The Egyptian god had become the Greek messenger, had become the Hermetic teacher, had become the alchemical master, had become the philosophical principle. Names changed, stories evolved, but the essence persisted. The eternal scribe was still writing, still recording, still ensuring that wisdom would not be lost even as cultures rose and fell. Yet this survival came with a cost. The original context was lost. The full depth of Egyptian understanding faded. Fragments remained, but the complete system disappeared. Later seekers would struggle to reconstruct what had been natural knowledge to earlier generations. Still, enough survived, enough to keep the questions alive, enough to inspire ongoing seeking, enough to remind humanity that beneath the surface of apparent chaos, order waited to be discovered. And so Thoth's journey continued, no longer as a god receiving worship, but as an archetype guiding understanding.
The divine intellect had become human heritage, available to any who approached knowledge with humility, patience, and ethical awareness.
There comes a moment in every tradition when the living connection breaks, when rituals become repetitions without understanding, when sacred sites become ruins, when the last priests who truly knew the meaning of the words fall silent forever. For Thoth's worship, that moment arrived gradually across centuries. As Christianity spread through Egypt, the old temples lost patronage. Pharaohs ceased, priests dwindled. The houses of life, those great centers of learning, closed their doors one by one. The final blow came in 391 CE, when the Roman Emperor Theodosius ordered the destruction of pagan temples. The great temple of Serapis in Alexandria, which had housed vast libraries and preserved ancient knowledge, was destroyed. Countless scrolls representing centuries of accumulated wisdom were lost. With them went much of Thoth's explicit teaching. Medical texts, astronomical observations, magical formulas, philosophical treatises, all vanished in flames or crumbled into dust through neglect. More importantly, the context vanished. Hieroglyphs could still be seen carved on temple walls, but fewer and fewer people could read them. Within generations, the script Thoth had inspired became incomprehensible. The words remained, but their meaning was sealed away. This was a particular kind of death. Thoth's wisdom did not completely disappear. Fragments survived in Hermetic texts, in Islamic scholarship, in scattered manuscripts preserved by chance. But the complete system, the full depth of Egyptian understanding, was lost. Imagine a library where all the books remain on the shelves, but the language they're written in has been forgotten. The knowledge exists, but it cannot be accessed. It waits in silence, hoping someone will eventually learn to read again. This is what happened to Thoth's legacy. The temples fell silent, the rituals stopped, the prayers were no longer spoken. The God who had recorded everything was himself forgotten by most of the world. Yet he had prepared for this. Thoth, who understood cycles, knew that decline was inevitable, that nothing in physical form endured forever, that even knowledge could be lost when civilizations fell. He had always taught that wisdom must be inscribed in multiple forms, preserved through multiple channels, distributed widely enough that total loss became impossible. And so, pieces of his teaching survived in unexpected places. Mathematical principles persisted in geometric knowledge. Astronomical observations influenced later calendar systems. Medical understanding informed Byzantine and Islamic physicians. Ethical teachings echoed in religious and philosophical traditions. Most importantly, the method survived. Thoth's insistence on careful observation, accurate recording, balanced judgment, and ethical application of knowledge. These principles continued even when his name was forgotten. Science, as it emerged in later centuries, followed essentially Thothian principles. Observe carefully, record accurately, test hypotheses, respect evidence over assumption, admit uncertainty. These were all methods Thoth had pioneered millennia earlier. The scientific revolution, the Enlightenment, the development of modern empirical thinking, all echoed Thoth's ancient wisdom that reality could be understood through disciplined attention. that knowledge should serve balance rather than domination, that wisdom came from humility before facts. In this way, Thoth survived his own death. The temple religion ended, but the fundamental insight persisted, that the universe was intelligible, that truth mattered, that knowledge carried responsibility. Even the forgetting served a purpose, for when Egyptian hieroglyphs were finally deciphered in the 1820s, when Champollion unlocked the Rosetta Stone and ancient texts could be read again, something remarkable happened. The modern world rediscovered Thoth not as a living god, but as a profound philosophical symbol. Scholars studying ancient Egypt encountered his teachings with fresh eyes, unbiased by centuries of interpretation. They saw in him an approach to knowledge that felt surprisingly modern, empirical, systematic, ethical. They recognized that Egyptian civilization had achieved sophistication that rivaled anything in Greek or Roman tradition. Thoth emerged from the ruins not as a relic, but as a revelation. Here was a civilization that had understood thousands of years before the scientific revolution that careful observation and accurate record-keeping were paths to truth, that knowledge without ethics was dangerous, that wisdom meant living in harmony with cosmic order. This rediscovery sparked renewed interest in Egyptian thought. Philosophers, psychologists, and scholars began exploring what could be learned from traditions they had previously dismissed as primitive. They found depth, sophistication, and insights that challenged modern assumptions. Carl Jung encountered Thoth through his study of alchemy and Egyptian symbolism. He recognized in the ibis-headed god an archetype representing the mediating function of consciousness, the ability to stand between opposites and find synthesis, the capacity for reflection, understanding, and integration.
In this psychological reading, Thoth became not a supernatural being, but a permanent potential within human consciousness. The ability to observe oneself, to record one's experiences, to learn from patterns, to seek truth even when uncomfortable. Every time someone pauses before reacting, chooses understanding over assumption, or values accuracy over convenience, Thoth lives. This interpretation might have disappointed ancient Egyptian priests who knew Thoth as a living divine presence, but it fulfilled something essential in Thoth's nature. He cared more about wisdom surviving than about receiving worship. Better to have his principles alive in human consciousness than his name spoken in empty rituals. The silence of the temples, therefore, was not absolute defeat. It was transformation. Thoth had always taught that form was less important than function, that knowledge adapted to survive, that truth found new expressions when old ones failed. As the modern world grappled with unprecedented access to information, Thoth's ancient warnings became newly relevant. Knowledge was spreading faster than understanding. Data multiplied beyond comprehension. Technology advanced without ethical guidance. Power exceeded wisdom. These were exactly the imbalances Thoth had warned against. Knowledge without context, information without meaning, capability without responsibility. The very problems he had addressed in ancient Egypt had returned at global scale. And so his teachings, dormant for centuries, spoke again to new challenges. The principle of Ma'at, cosmic balance, reminded a world of unlimited growth that sustainability mattered.
The example of the Hall of Judgment suggested that actions carried weight beyond immediate consequences. The image of the eternal scribe recording everything resonated in an age where digital records preserved everything permanently. Thoth had become timeless by becoming essential, not a god requiring belief, but a principle requiring acknowledgement. As long as wisdom mattered, he remained relevant. As long as knowledge needed ethical grounding, his teaching endured. As long as humans sought to understand rather than merely control, his spirit lived. The fall of the temples, then, was not an ending. It was a shedding of form that allowed essence to persist. Thoth had always existed in the space between things, between thought and action, knowledge and wisdom, recording and understanding. Physical temples were never his true home. His real temple was consciousness itself. His true worship was careful thinking. His lasting monument was every moment someone chose accuracy over convenience, balance over excess, truth over comfortable fiction. In quiet libraries, in research laboratories, in courtrooms seeking justice, in meditation halls pursuing understanding, wherever humans engage in the patient work of aligning knowledge with wisdom, Thoth remains present, not demanding recognition, simply observing, recording, guiding through the example of divine intelligence that served rather than dominated. The temples fell silent, but the questions they housed continue echoing, and in those questions, Thoth still speaks.
Night deepens over the desert once more. The same stars that shone on ancient Thebes burn overhead. The same moon that Thoth measured so carefully traces its silver path across darkness. Millennia have passed since priests last spoke his name in ritual. Yet somehow, in ways both subtle and certain, he remains. Thoth's story does not end because it was never really about him. It was always about what he represented, the possibility that chaos can be comprehended, that truth can be known, that reality responds to understanding rather than force alone. Every civilization must rediscover these principles for itself. The answers cannot simply be inherited. Each generation faces the same fundamental questions Thoth addressed in creation's earliest moments. How do we measure what matters? How do we preserve what should endure? How do we balance knowledge with wisdom? These questions never become obsolete. They merely wear different costumes in different eras. And so Thoth's relevance persists, not because ancient Egypt was superior to modern civilization, but because the challenges of consciousness transcend time. We live in an age of unprecedented information. More knowledge exists at our fingertips than ancient Egyptian priests accumulated in lifetimes. Yet information and understanding remain profoundly different things. Data and wisdom are not synonyms. And in this gap between knowing and comprehending, Thoth's teaching matters more than ever. He reminds us that knowledge carries weight, that words, especially written words, endure beyond their speaking, that records become reality in ways we don't always anticipate. In an age where everything is documented, where digital memory never forgets, where every statement lives forever in searchable archives, these ancient warnings about the responsibility of the scribe take on urgent contemporary meaning. He reminds us that time is not merely duration, but quality, that there are seasons for action
and seasons for reflection, that rushing toward the future without learning from the past creates imbalance. In a culture obsessed with speed, productivity, and constant forward momentum, Thoth's patient measurement of cycles offers necessary correction.
He reminds us that judgment is not punishment but revelation, that truth eventually weighs every heart against the feather of cosmic order, that consequences cannot be avoided, only understood. In a world seeking escape from accountability, where power often evades justice, the image of inescapable scales offers both warning and hope. Most importantly, he reminds us that wisdom is not mere intelligence, that knowing how to do something differs profoundly from understanding whether you should, that capability without ethics creates catastrophe, that the greatest knowledge asks not can we, but should we, and what happens if we do. These lessons were never confined to ancient Egypt. They belong to any civilization sophisticated enough to face them. They emerge naturally from the structure of reality itself, which Thoth understood operates according to principles that transcend culture and time. In the silence after the temples fell, Thoth did not disappear. He simply stopped being external and became internal. From God to archetype, from divine being to human potential. The same intelligence that once stood beside Ra now resides in every mind capable of reflection, observation, and ethical choice. You do not need to believe in Thoth to access his wisdom. You need only to practice what he embodied: patient observation, careful thought, balanced judgment, responsible knowledge. These capacities exist in everyone. They are not supernatural gifts, but natural human abilities that simply require cultivation. When you pause before speaking to consider whether your words serve truth, when you record events accurately rather than as you wish they had been, when you seek to understand before judging, when you recognize that your choices carry weight beyond immediate consequences, when you value balance over domination, when you pursue wisdom rather than mere cleverness. In all these moments, Thoth lives, not as a god demanding worship, but as a principle guiding consciousness toward alignment with what is fundamentally real and right. The ancient Egyptians believed that to speak someone's name was to keep them alive, that the dead endured as long as they were remembered. In this sense, Thoth has achieved true immortality, not because people speak his name, though some do, but because the principles he represented cannot die while consciousness exists. As long as there are beings capable of thought, wisdom will be needed. As long as there are choices, balance will matter. As long as there are records, truth will eventually emerge. And in all these inevitabilities, Thoth persists. Perhaps the greatest teaching is simply this, that paying attention is a sacred act, that observation itself is a form of worship, that the universe reveals itself to those who watch carefully, think clearly, and live honestly, that wisdom is not complex, though the path to it may be difficult. The eternal scribe still writes, not on papyrus or stone, but on the fabric of existence itself, recording what is true regardless of what anyone believes, measuring what matters regardless of what anyone values, maintaining balance even when no one acknowledges it. And occasionally, in quiet moments, when the mind settles and the heart grows still, when the noise of the world recedes and clarity unexpectedly arrives, you might feel something ancient stirring, a presence that observes without judging, understands without explaining, guides without controlling. That is Thoth, not as supernatural intervention, but as your own deepest capacity for wisdom, the part of you that knows when you are aligned with truth and when you have wandered from it, the inner scribe recording everything, the inner judge weighing your heart, the inner teacher reminding you that knowledge without responsibility leads to suffering. The temples may have fallen silent, but the principles they housed remain eternally available, waiting in the stillness between thoughts, in the pause before action, in the question that precedes certainty. So this story, which began in darkness before creation, ends in darkness after the temples fell. But darkness, as Thoth always knew, is not emptiness, it is possibility, the space from which new understanding emerges, the silence in which truth becomes audible. Close your eyes again now. Feel the weight of history pressing forward into this moment, and know that somewhere, in ways both real and metaphorical, a figure with the head of an ibis still watches, still records, still ensures that meaning is not lost. Thoth does not need your belief, but he offers his wisdom freely to any who seek it, not as ancient mythology, but as eternal truth, waiting to be remembered. The moon rises, the stars turn, and the eternal witness continues his patient work, measuring infinity, recording eternity, reminding the universe how to remember itself. The story does not end. It never does.